Well, can President Cyril Ramaphosa's stimulus package help revive the country's ailing economy? Or is it just another turnaround strategy for the ANC's election ambitions next year? Well, at least two political analysts believe the economic revival plan announced last month is not a stimulus package. Well, Wits School of Governance's Professor Ivor Sarakinsky and Ebrahim Fakir, who's the director of programs at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute, join us now to unpack what they believe, why they believe the plan won't work. You boldly, gentlemen, assert that what Ramaphosa announced is not a stimulus package. Ebrahim Fakir, why?
Well, no, because a stimulus package would be a package which actually injects money into the economy, firstly, and secondly, would provide some kind of relief for the difficulties, particularly the economic difficulties that ordinary South Africans are facing. And this plan does neither of those two. Now, I can understand why that is the case, and that's the case because of the particular precipice that the country has been brought to over the last 2 decades.
Even if it's not necessarily new money, but a reorganization or whatever they call it. In other words, taking money that would otherwise not be used or used effectively and to put it in good use.
What we are saying, boldly as you say it, is that this is about stabilization. Now the question you've got to ask is, why do you require stabilization? Why did you come to the point at which you require stabilization rather than building on incremental progress that you might have made? And that's the short point we're making. Now we're not saying it's a bad thing to have stabilization, just don't call it a stimulus, because it is not a stimulus and it doesn't do what a stimulus would ordinarily do.
Stabilization, what's the significance of the two of you pointing that out, Ivor Sarakinsky?
We're trying to say that the names of programs is important in terms of sending the right message through to citizens and potential investors. And if one is going to engage in semantics, business people might see that this isn't a serious initiative. So it's quite important to get the language right, and we argue that there has been some hyperbole there. The other thing is that it's not just a question of an investment summit and pledges and announcing numbers. For these kinds of packages to work, you need serious under-the-bonnet initiatives to drive programs, to make programs happen, to clear the loopholes, to find ways around all the legislative and regulatory obstacles for these investments to really bear fruit. And we're not seeing that at all.
Well, I've had people, in fact, as late as Friday, saying that you need that stabilization first. To give your potential investors and indeed your own population the confidence to knowing that those who squander money again will be put in jail, that you're jacking up your systems to make sure that money doesn't disappear or things don't fall through the cracks. So that stabilization is an essential part of your path to recovery.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. I'm saying that there's a prior step. So if you want to drive infrastructure as an employment creation intervention, and that was a clear statement that the President made, it's not that you just go and build infrastructure. You've got to coordinate national, provincial and local regulatory frameworks. The legal technicalities in terms of land use, of environmental impact assessments, and a whole range of technical issues have to be cleared first. It requires incredible technical, legal, project management, engineering know-how. And without that, the basic frameworks aren't going to result in green shoots of these projects, because it's just going to get bogged down in red tape and being sent back because you haven't done this, you haven't signed that, and it just results in the delays of this implementation.
But how much of that, Ebrahim, is an imposition of, is it Section 3 of the Constitution, intergovernmental relations, that as things stand, it's difficult, if not impossible, to actually do what national government intends to do or says it can do, given the current arrangements?
It's not impossible, and I don't think that what you're alluding to in terms of the intergovernmental relations framework is impossible. What I was alluding to and what we're actually propounding in the article is quite simply that one of the preconditions is that you need high levels of state capacity. And part of state capacity is about state coordination. And if there are difficulties in coordination, then everything begins to fall flat. But you've got to ask yourself one question beyond that. Quite apart from the fact that coordination is necessary for intergovernmental relations, you also need a stable politics. And you need a less fractious governing party. You just have a news report which is saying that a former provincial premier is now joining a court case to contest the legitimacy of an intervention made by the parent party. Now, if that kind of thing goes on, and your politics are fundamentally unstable, then what kind of reliance can you have on coordinated state capacity? Not just the high-level technical capacity that I was referring to, but basic coordination efficiencies, which require stable politics in order to be able to do this. So for as long as you have fractious politics and a president which appear to be loath to making tough decisions about cleaning up not just malgovernance, but politics in the party, then I think you can announce as many numbers as you like, as much stabilization and incentive packages as you like. None of those bear fruit because you're missing both the technical aspects, but you're also missing the basic coordination aspects.
Well, I would have wanted to get into in a bit of detail into the technical capacity of the state to do what Cyril Ramaphosa and the finance minister and others who have spoken already say it can do. But I want us to stick with the politics part of it, which you have started, Ebrahim, because part of the problem, I remember going to the medium-term budget statement last week, among the big arguments that economists and political analysts were making was how politics in all the provinces, within the state broadly, is making it so difficult to do even half what the state can do with all the inherent limitations in how things work at the moment.
It's a major problem, and the National Development Plan identifies this and describes the problem in terms of the political administrative interface. And in South Africa, we've got a situation where politics prevails, and you have interfering politicians in administrative policy implementation issues. And that further complicates executing very complicated projects when you've got politicians coming saying we're doing oversight, but what we're actually doing is interfering because we want certain people to be beneficiaries of these interventions.
In fact,
and that just rolls over the time frames for execution.
In fact, I had a couple of senior ANC politicians saying Cyril Ramaphosa had his investment conference, summit, and his job summit, and he didn't really take the ANC through what he was planning to do and why he wanted to do it and do it the way he wants to do it.
So you need that technical capacity to be insulated from the politics, not to be autonomous. So the politicians make the policy decisions, and then you need your technical experts to execute and implement, your engineers to build the pipelines, etc. And once the decision's made, the money is allocated in budgets, you stay out and you make sure that they do what they're supposed to do instead of micromanaging and micro-interfering. And until we reach that stage, the politics is going to dominate, and that is going to increasingly interfere with execution. And that, I think, is part of the big problem with water affairs, which is in the newspapers for all the wrong reasons. It's that kind of interference.
Do the two of you believe that in the time left between now and next year's election, there is very little, if anything, that Cyril Ramaphosa can do? A lot will depend on how things pan out after next year's election, and whatever.
There are obviously two different views, and I can't speak for Ivor, obviously, because he's perfectly capable of speaking for himself. But I have a view that believes that I don't think that Cyril Ramaphosa is going to do anything dramatic or drastic, all of which are necessary before the election, because he needs to keep the different factions on side in the ANC. And you're already looping back to the days of Thabo Mbeki, so you're getting that kind of fractious politics. I mean, if senior ANC politicians are telling you Cyril Ramaphosa had his investment summit, not the ANC, it harks back to precisely that kind of debate. Oh, Mbeki didn't take the ANC along with him. He centralized all this decision-making in the state. And Ramaphosa will come up with precisely the same kind of argument. He is centering the technocratic expertise within the states, leaving the party behind. That's not necessarily true. But look, frankly, we're in the silly season. It is well and truly upon us. It is purely all election campaigning. And there are certain decisions that the president can take, both about reducing the size of cabinet, about making political interventions in the ANC to get rid of those people who are actual stumbling blocks, and many of them are known. But he's loath to do that because he cannot do that come the next election. I think it would actually buy him greater credibility if he makes those difficult decisions, which would be popular in the short term, but would benefit the credibility in the long term.
Your final thought, Ivor?
I think that the president is flying on investments that follow naturally from previous investments. So if you're invested, you can't just pull out because you lose huge amounts of money. So you've got to invest to remain competitive. And I think a lot of the number that was announced comes from that kind of investment. In terms of attracting new FDI and local investment, I think that that's where the real challenge is. And I'm not seeing significant new investment in the pledges that have been made. And in that sense, I think there's still enormous work to be done in terms of getting investors to understand that policy volatility is a short-term thing and that there is capacity to execute these policies in the way we've mentioned earlier in the medium long term. Without that, we're not going to create an investment-friendly environment.